Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ignorant Intellectual on Media. Today, getting overpiled by stuff again. I think I maybe go thrift shopping a little bit too much. Maybe I should calm down on it. But I sell books, I sell stuff all during the week, and I end up having some money. I can go out and buy the things that I want to buy, and then I want to go buy it. So then I go right. But then it just piles up, right? Uh, so I thought I'd do another thrift store haul, get rid of the stuff from my desk, and then we can move on to other things. I have finished my top 130 movies of all time videos. There's five of them. I was going to do, I'll explain this in the intro to the videos of those videos, but look forward to that. I'll be posting that in the next few weeks. But let's do this thrift store haul right now. All right. So, should we do this big stack here first? Hi, how are you? All right. So, The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman by Lawrence Stern. It's his what? Magnus opus, his masterpiece. All right. Basically, uh, I picked it up because it's part of the Oxford World Classics, and those are really easy to resell. I found two of them at a thrift store, so I figured I'd pick them up. I don't really want to go into the explanation of this because I haven't read it, so we'll leave that. I just have to find space to put this stuff. All right, so that was the first one by the Oxford World Classics. The second one was Tobias Smollett's The Expedition of Humphrey Clinker. All right. Okay. So two classic novels, English novels or British novels, I guess you could say, and both from the Oxford World Classic. These are the newest versions. So these are the easiest ones to sell. So I can sell these individually for, anywhere between $5 and $10 each. The older ones, I usually put them all together and sell it 10 for $30, right? So, all right. So that's the second one. Next up is Texts on Socrates, one of the great philosophical works by Plato. Basically, it has a bunch of his dialogues, which is youth. Okay, ignorant intellectual is going to rear its head. All right, so it's Euthyphro, Euthyphro, Apology, and Crito, and Aristophanes' Clouds. All right, so Clouds by Aristophanes. See, Aristophanes, right? Aristophanes. So three dialogues by Plato, and then one play by Aristophanes. Aristophanes. Now, Aristophanes did not like Plato or Socrates, and he's the greatest of all the ancient Greek um, comedic playwrights, and he really pokes fun at um, at Socrates in his play. All right, uh, so you're going to read some serious three philosophical works. They're all in dialogue form where you have a conversation. Socrates will have a conversation with you. He'll ask questions. He'll basically play dumb. That's the Socratic method, is he tells you that he knows nothing and you need to educate him. And so he'll ask you questions, but those questions are leading, and they'll bring you to a place where you're going to be in agreement with the way that he thinks, right? So it's really good if you want to be a lawyer, right? Anyway, so uh, dialogues by Plato with Socrates as the main character in them, and then you get Aristophanes. Uh, what would you do? Comedy towards Socrates, right? So it's a good book. I should be able to sell this for probably around $10. And then we have next up is I went to the same place and they had three books. Three of Plato's books. His Plato's greatest book is this one, which is The Republic. All right, and this is the one translated by Bloom, Alan Bloom, which is usually the one that you want, um, the modern one, anyways. All right, so it basically gives you an in-depth look into the way that Plato thought society should be put together. So if you like political philosophy, this is going to be one of the first ones you should read. This and Aristotle's Politics. But basically, this is about the philosopher kings, where everybody should be trained. Like he kind of uses the argument. Well, a modern argument would be, well, you wouldn't go to a carpenter, to get a an appendectomy, you would go to a doctor because a doctor is trained to do those things, and specifically, you'd go to a surgeon, right? So why do you let, let's say, in a democracy, anybody become, your leader? No, they should be trained, and they should be trained in philosophy. So there should be philosopher kings that run your state, right? And then he goes into, the allegory of the cave and all that. Anyways, it's an extremely good book. It's one of my all-time favorite books to read. I've read it numerous times, and every time I read it, I end up, learning even more, right? So it's a great book. So if you haven't read this and you're kind of like scared of philosophy, you don't think maybe you're up to the level of, I'm not up to that level, but I read this and I enjoyed it really well. Political philosophy is one of my favorite things to read about. All right, so that's the Republic of Plato. All right, and then third, I found another book by him, and this one is, don't need that, the Essential Plato. Basically, it's mostly all of his stuff. Right, you'll have again the Republic in here, and you have Meno, Erythro from the other ones, Apology, Credo, Phaedo, the Symposium, Phaedrus. Am I brutalizing those names? Like I said, I'm not formally trained in philosophy, so um, selections from Charmides, Lysias, other dialogues, and the Laws, the Trial and Death of Socrates, and a bunch of other his books, including um, the Republic. All right, so I should be able to sell this for close to 20. So, all right, so that's Plato's. Next up is I found, okay, so remember I was talking a lot in whenever I do these hauls about the 5 different sets of books that I collect. I collect the modern library, the everyman library, the original versions of them. All right. And I collect the everyman library, the modern version of them, the one that started in 1992. And then I collect, so it's 6, not 5, sorry. And then I collect the leather bound editions, like the Franklin Library, like this one. All right. And the Easton Press, which is another leather-bound edition. They look like those as well. And the third is the Folio Society. Folio Society is, a British imprint that prints a bunch of. It's a lot of British-centric stuff. So a lot of it is, uninteresting, but a lot of it is not. And they don't just do literature; they do everything. They do history, they do philosophy, they do literature, they do, um, British-centric writing and history and anthropology, you name it. Whatever is academic, they put it in the and those editions in the Folio Society are all really nice hard cover, usually cloth bound hard covers in a um, in a box, usually in a slipcase, made of hard cardboard and decorated as well. And they're really, really nice editions. So what I do with those three, the two leather bound editions and the Folio Society, is I just collect I collect and keep the ones that I've read. So let's say I went out and read George Orwell's 1984, and then I'm looking around. What I want is a keepsake because I read that book and I really enjoyed it. So I want a keepsake. I want a leather-bound edition or a folio edition or some sort of really nice edition of 1984 as a keepsake. I read that book. This is it on my shelf, and uh, and so that's what I do. Because before I used to collect all the Franklins and all the Easton Press uh, leather bounds, but there's just so many of them. There's so many Folio Society. There's over 1,000 folios. Um, it gets cost prohibitive, and I'm not going to read most of them because, especially the folios, because they're of things that I'm not really interested in reading about. Some of them are, anyways, like a walking tour of Dickens' England back in the day. I mean, a history buff may want to read that, but I don't know, maybe I would read that, but I'd rather read Dickens' works themselves than his impression of London back in the 19th century or whatever, right? So, but a historian would be really interested in that. So anyway, so that's what I do. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I found a Folio Society, um, and I found this for $12. All right, and this is basically a history of Europe in 3 volumes. All right, and see that box? See how nice that box is? All right. And so this is how the Folio Society comes. Usually it's one volume and it's in a decorated box or just a plain cardboard box a nice to protect it, right? It's the books themselves that are really nice, right? So, but these box sets that Folio puts out are really nice. They usually have really nice decorations on them as well. So here's an example of one of the books, right? All right. If you look inside, there's usually illustrations. Now this is more of a history book, so it probably does it less. But some of them have really nice illustrations on them, right? So you understand. So these are really nice hard. This is a cloth hardbound book in a really nice box, and they're really beautiful editions, right? Now I'm not going to keep this because um, it's not one of the books that I've read, and so. But I found it for $12, and I could sell it for like anywhere between $50 and $100, depending. I would have to look up to see, but it's in really nice condition. I'll protect it, and then I'll resell it for somebody who really likes collecting folio societies. Um, they're really, really beautiful editions. So, and let's do this one next. Okay, so Nietzsche's "Thus Spoke Zarathustra" or Thustra. This is a German philosophical book that I actually read and really enjoyed. It basically gives you Nietzsche's theory on the world. Basically, his Superman ideas and God is dead and he's the Antichrist and so on and so forth. You get all this in this one and a few of his other books. But if you're going to read only one book, uh, maybe you could read Beyond Good and Evil. But I decided I was going to first read this book. All right, and this book, yeah, Nietzsche is the most accessible of all the German philosophers like Heidegger and all those other guys, extremely difficult to get through and try to understand what they're talking about. But Nietzsche, not so much. He basically says that there's two kinds of people in the world. All right, there's the meek, and then there's the strong. Right, there's the sheep, and then there's the either the sheep herder, if you want to put it that way, or if you want to be more evil about it, the wolf. Right, and he says society is set up for the sheep herder or the wolf, right? Um, and he's the perfect example of it. He should lead, right? So his type of person should lead. You have supermen in the world, these great men, and everybody else is there to prop them up, basically, right? So it's if you're depressed, I wouldn't really read Nietzsche because he's going to bring you into a dark place. But if you have a happy disposition and you can read things that are a little bit darker, and then just walk your way out of that unlit room. Nietzsche is really, really good to read. All right, so that's Nietzsche. Oh, and the reason why I showed you is this is one of the original Everyman Library um, titles. So this one is number 892 in it, and it's the larger ones. The original ones that came out in the early 1900s were usually about this big, smaller, so you could fit them in your pocket. Then they decided to go with a larger version of it, right? And but they're all hardcover, and they're all, they're surviving. This one is This one might be a remake. It might not be because it's number 800. There's 1,000 volumes in this library, right? So this one was 1958. All right. So it was first published in 1933. So basically, it's a reprint. So and this was printed in 1960 in the bigger volume. But this is an example of what. So here's a. Let me get a regular sized. This is a regular sized, soft cover book, and this is a hardcover would be around this size as well, and this is what a everyman size is, right? They're small, right? They're easy to carry around as well. Now, as you notice, this person, well, uh, see the top of it? Look, it's falling apart, right? Because people don't protect their books. They don't care about them, right? So they read them and move on, right? But I care about, so I'm going to put this in mylar plastic to protect it, right? So, all right, so that's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, one of the great, great philosophical works. Speaking of philosophical works, here's a Penguin Classic. This is not the most recent editions of the Penguin Classics. This is the one just before it. And this is a paperback size. They have two different sizes. They have the paperback size, and then they have one that's a larger edition of it. So just a little bit bigger, but not as big as, let's say, this one, right? It's in between the two. But anyway, so this is the Discourses by Machiavelli. Now, if you know Machiavelli, he's the one that wrote The Prince. That that piece of work he dedicated to you know uh, I don't know the specific name of the guy. He was an Italian aristocrat, and he was trying to get in good favor with him to become part of his entourage, I guess, and run certain things because he was kind of kicked out of politics at that time. So he decided to write this. Uh, decided to write The Prince, and these are his other discourses. And um, if you want two books by Machiavelli, you'll have to read The Prince if you like political philosophy, if you like philosophy in general. This is, it's where the term a Machiavellian comes, being really devious and really evil. Well, you need to read The Prince in order to see where that comes from. And secondarily, the discourses of his. He has two books, The Discourses and The Prince, that you should read. All right, and this is part of, like I said, the Penguin Classics. Anytime you find this kind of book, it's worth reading. I haven't found a book that I've read from the Penguin Classics that isn't at least worth reading. Whether I liked it or not is a different story. All right. So next up is Tolstoy's War and Peace, that semi kind of novel, historical, philosophical work that is like 5 million pages long. And if you want to dedicate your life to reading this, I have not read this. I just can't get through a novel this big. If you would have put it out in three parts, I probably would have digested it. Like I've read science fiction and fantasy books that are bigger than this, but they've been broken into three, four, five, or six books, right? So it's easier, let's say, to read Lord of the Rings because you read one book and then you're done with that book. And you read the second book, but if Lord of the Rings was all just one book, it would be like this size or maybe larger, right? And it seems more daunting. But if you're going to read Russian literature, just like Russian philosophy, it's really um, uh, difficult to get into and read, at least in my opinion, for me. And I did pick up this book and I read the first maybe 50 to 100 pages of it, and then I put it down. And I said, okay, I want to read something that's a little bit more exciting for me, right? But it's one of the greatest Russian novels of all time, so you can't really avoid it. Um, well, I guess you could, because I have, but your education will be lacking, right? All right. So next up after that is my argument probably for the second greatest dystopian novel of all time, maybe the third greatest, and that's 1984 by George Orwell. This this book, Animal Farm, all right, and I think Penguin put out a 4 or 5 volume edition of his essays and letters and things. That's really interesting as well. You should search for those three things. He's an extremely good uh, writer, and he's not difficult to get into, let's say, like Tolstoy or whatever, right? So, and this is his greatest book. It's basically, about Big Brother runs the world. He can watch you through your television and everywhere else. It's basically a monitored society, and you have a man in it that doesn't conform as much, right? So it's extremely good book if you haven't read it. All right. Next up after that is The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. All right. This was a really good movie. I have not read the book, so I'm not going to go right into the book. The main reason why I picked this up is because it's a Collins Classics, and I'm gonna I'm gonna see if these things are sellable. All right, so I see them around more and more. I'm gonna get 10 of them together and sell it for $30. See if they sell. If they do, then I'll continue picking up the Collins Classics. All right. Next up after that is one of the greatest novels of all time, one of the greatest novels of the 20th century, and that's Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. Basically, it's a science fiction anti-war book about a guy who survives the bombing of Dresden and then ends up being kidnapped or captured by aliens and brought to a different planet, put on display on that planet in a zoo for aliens to watch him. All right, and then he ends up back on the planet. So, and you don't know whether that is just from shell shock, or would it be shell shock? No, it'd be a PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, they call it now, right? Um, and it's an extremely interesting read, and you will read it very quickly because Vonnegut is really, really good at writing All right? And another great classic from the 20th century, To Kill a Mockingbird. I've spoken about this book numerous times. Whenever I see this book at a thrift store, I'll automatically pick it up because it's really easy to resell. It's basically about a trial of a black man accused of raping a white woman, and Atticus Finch, a white lawyer, defends him in court. All right. And then I found this one, which is part of the Penguin English Library, but it's a science fiction book, and it's The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. All right. They all have this type of double line on the spines. Then you have a center, but I think their choice of color for putting the title is a little bit, because you can't really read the title. I think they should have thought about that a little bit more. But basically, this is about the Invisible Man, made into movies, everything about it. Don't really have to go into it much. And then we have part of the Penguin Classics, the gray version of the Penguin Classics, and this one is Under Fire, Henri Barbusse. I'm assuming he's French, Henri Barbusse. Under Fire, yeah, translated, right? Under Fire follows the fortunes of the French 6th Battalion during the First World War, all right? So it's a war novel, war book. It may be nonfiction, actually. So, um, but these gray ones are really good, just like the black ones, the gray ones, the silver gray ones, are really, really good to pick up. You will not go wrong picking up any of them. These ones, or even, they're both Penguin Classics. I'm not sure why the designation from black to gray, because there are black versions, modern versions that came out at the same time as these ones. These are the ones that are being issued today. Um, why some of them are gray and some of them are black, I haven't figured that one out yet. And you have the modern ones, and you have the English library. I just showed you the English. This is the version of the modern. All right, this is John le Carré's The Night Manager. I have not read any of le Carré's work, so I don't know about this one, but this one's kind of gray as well. Um, and this one is a modern classic, has that type of spine, right? These are all books from like the 20th century on, right? All right, I'm running out of space here. All right, and what do we have after that? All right, Inside the Whale and Other Essays. Here's a perfect example. All right, so this one is another Penguin, but it's just Penguin 20th century classic. You ever know Penguin just covers all of its bases? Every type of book that's ever been printed that's any good is going to be in a Penguin version of it. And these ones are all green. They're green colored, right? So, all right. Um, these 20th century classics, right? All right. So, Inside the Whale and Other Essays. Remember, I was speaking about Orwell, 1984, Animal Farm. Well, this is um, some of his essays. And if you want to see whether you want to delve into all of his essays, maybe pick up this book and read it. It gives a few of them, not all of them. There's like 4 volumes, I think, if I remember correctly, of Orwell's essays. All right, so I can put that down. All right, next up after that is the Collins version of the complete works of Shakespeare. If you're going to read literature, you really need to read Shakespeare. There's a whole bunch of different versions you can get of Shakespeare. Probably the easiest version to read is No Fear Shakespeare. There are a bunch of editions of. Do I have any here? I may have some. If I do, I'll show it to you uh, through the video. Um, which basically on one page it gives the modern version of the play, like it was written today in modern English, and then on the other page is Shakespeare's writing. Now, the modern is boring compared to Shakespeare's writing. So what you need to do is, yeah, you can read it that way, and then you get an idea. But what you're going to do is you're going to pick up Shakespeare's language. All right, it's English, so but there is a bit of a learning curve to learn it. And once you learn his language and can read it fluently, it doesn't take long, maybe 3 or 4 plays of these, and then you'll kind of get the lingo down, and uh, you'll really enjoy Shakespeare, and you'll realize that Shakespeare is the greatest writer of the English language, right? All right, so that's Shakespeare, Essays and Introductions by W.B. Yeats. I made a mistake with this book. Yeats is really good a writer, and normally, all right, this is a Collier book. Normally, this would be sold, but I put it in my back of my car and it bounced around. And see what happened, right? But that's not the main mistake. Somebody's still going to buy this, but I'm going to probably have to sell it for like three bucks or something cheap, right? Um, what I forgot to do was look inside. Every time you buy a used book at a thrift store, always look inside, all right? Because you want to see that it's clean. People hate books that aren't clean, all right? And if you notice, see the red writing, red underlines. All right, so this book can be sold, but it's going to be sold really cheap, so it wasn't worth picking up. All right, so I should have looked a little bit more. Next up is Mr. Palomar from Calvino Harvest book. All right, now Calvino is one of the greats. All right, Cuban writers. He's Cuban, right? Superb storytelling gifts earned him international renown and a reputation as one of the world's best fabulists. Born in Cuba, yeah. All right. So born in Cuba in 1923, Calvino was raised in Italy, all right, where he lived most of his life. He died in Siena at the age of 61. All right. So he's Italian, basically uh, born in Cuba, but Italian. So he's an Italian writer. So this is translated from the Italian, and it's a short novel. All right. Next up is one of Voltaire's greatest books, and that's Candide. All right. Do I have to go into Candide? There's so much stuff here. All right, you should know about Candide, right? And Jean-Jacques Rousseau's The Basic Political Writings. Again, this book was in really nice condition, and then it started bouncing around in the back of my car. So protect the books when you're traveling. All right, it makes them more able to be resold. All right, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, along with who, like John Locke, um, Thomas Hobbes. These guys are all great political philosophers, and Rousseau wrote, what was it? On the social contract and discourse on political economy. So basically, he's the French version of the English Hobbes or Locke. Locke's uh, two treatises on government and Hobbes' Leviathan are all are giants in political philosophy that you should read. All right. Next up is I had this book, but I sold it. It was in a hardcover, and the guy wanted it, and he paid $30 shipping to get it because he lived, on the other side of the country. And then I found it again. So, The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin, basically talking about natural selection, how over time some species will go, if they can't adapt, they will go extinct and others will thrive. And, uh, you know, basically over time, you'll see them change over time to adapt to their environment, right? All right. So, it's one of the big science books, right? All right. So then Lynn Reed Banks, The Indian in the Cupboard, which is basically about a little boy who gets a cupboard, or basically, a box with a drawer in it, or you know, and he opens whenever he puts he has cowboys and Indian little toys, like soldiers now. You get those little soldiers in Toy Story. Well, these were cowboys and Indians. You play cowboys and Indians. That's probably not like politically correct these days, but anyway, uh, so whenever he puts the Indian inside the cupboard, closes the cupboard, and then opens it up, the Indian comes alive, but he's only like this big, right? And then, anyways, it goes on from there. And people were so impressed with the book, they made a movie out of it, which was really good as well. All right. So now we got the Irish writer Seamus Heaney and some of his poems. Heaney is, one of the greatest 20th century poets, and you should read his work if you have not, if you're into poetry, which I am not, but he sells well. So, all right. And then we have Rumi, another poet. All right. And we have some of his stuff. All right. This one is called The Book of Love. And basically, it's poetry about love. All right. And then we have a Canadian novel. All right. So remember, I've always talked to you about the New Canadian Library. It's a set of books that have been printed since the late 50s. Like there was a renaissance of Canadian literature in the 1960s, and the New Canadian Library was part of that. It was an imprint of McClellan and Stewart. They wanted to put out, well, there was a guy named, is it Malcolm Ross? I think his name was Malcolm Ross, who wanted, because he was teaching, let's say, Canadian literature in university. He was an English professor, and he couldn't find the books to teach his students Canadian literature. So he had to teach them American literature or English, British literature, right? Couldn't teach literature from his own country because you'd have to get the books, but you'd have to buy them, when they originally came out because there was very little reprints of them, and they're all on hardcover and they're all difficult to find. So if you wanted to, you know, talk about, let's say, Frederick Grove, all right, one of the early guys, or any of those guys, you would have real difficulty in trying to find actual books for your students to read, right? So what he went to McClellan, it was McClellan, Jack McClellan, and said we should start an imprint called the New Canadian Library and start producing, Canadian homegrown novels, books that we can use in university to teach students Canadian literature, and that's what they did. And it started, I think it was 1958, and it went on from there. Now, there's how I like to refer to them is there's been six versions of the New Canadian Library. Now they're no longer in print. Nobody prints them because uh, the imprint, which is part of McClellan and Stewart, was sold off twice. Once to an American company, and then that was sold off to a German company. So a German company now owns, the biggest names in Canadian literature, right? And they're not producing. Penguin is putting out some stuff in their Penguin's modern classics or Penguin classics books, but you're not getting any, Canadian imprints printing Canadian novels unless they're new, right? So, uh, so the New Canadian Library has gone through six versions, what I call six versions, but it's just six different um, covers, right? They're all soft cover. Originally, they were paperbacks, and the latest version of them are, a trade paper, the larger hardcover, soft covers. Here's an example of one, right? All right. So this is the last version of the New Canadian Library. You can't get the New Canadian Library anymore, other than these ones that go around, right? So this one is the sixth version of them, and they went through six series, as I call them. At first, they were numbered, and then they stopped numbering them by series four. All right, and then they just started putting them out uh, without numbers on them, right? Anyway, so this is the Tomorrow Tamer by Margaret Lawrence. Margaret Lawrence is one of the big names in Canadian literature. All right, her Maniwaki series, right, um, is one of the big. There's like four books in it, uh, but I have not read a lot of her stuff. I think I read The Fire Dwellers. I think it was The Fire Dwellers, but don't quote me on that. It's been 20 years. Um, but these, if you want to read Canadian literature, um, I'm sorry to say, I don't know. To my Canadian readers, people will read English or American literature before they'll read Canadian literature, and they're missing out. All right, except for the exceptional ones like Margaret Atwood, and some others, maybe Leonard Cohen, maybe what's his name from Vancouver, the guy that wrote Generation X, Douglas Copeland, right? Maybe these guys are read by Canadians, but most Canadian literature is left by the wayside unless you're in university or college and you're taking a Canadian literature course, right? You're not reading Canadian literature, at least most don't. I mean, you will get like 1 in 100 or 1 in 50 that delve into Canadian literature and read a lot of it, but most Canadians don't read their own literature. It's strange. They think it's second rate when it's not. All right. And but if you want to read Canadian literature, look for the New Canadian Library. It's probably the most popular of all the different libraries. You have Macmillan that put out a bunch of Canadian literature as well as a competitor to this imprint. But mostly, if you're going to read Canadian literature, historically speaking, most of the time you're going to be picking up New Canadian Library paperback books. All right. So this is one of them as an example. All right, so that's that. What's up next here? We did a lot of books. All right, and we got uh, the poems of John Keats in a nice small hardcover. All right, it's really nice. It's a really nice book. So uh, I picked it up. I don't, like I said, I don't really read poetry. Maybe at some point I'll retry it, but I don't know. I have difficulty with poetry. Uh, so, but Keats is a big name, so he'll sell. And then I have Augustine's City of God. His Confessions and City of God um, are one of the two, I mean, two of the greatest, Christian literature books ever written. Um, he is extremely influential in the Christian church. And those two books, even if you're not Christian or you're not Catholic, and if if you really want to understand, the history of Christianity, even though you may not be a Christian, Augustine is a person that you should be reading. All right. Now, this is a paperback version of City of God. Now, City of God is friggin' large, numerous volumes, if I remember correctly. And this is just a condensed version of it. Take the big bullet points of those books and put them in one novel for one book for a person to read. All right. And this sells really easily as well, even though it's an old book that only has $1.45 on it. I can easily sell this for $5. All right. I think that's all the books. And now we're going to get into movies and stuff. All right. So let's do this. All right. So I picked up this Pac-Man museum. My son and I like Pac-Man, so I figured I'd pick this up for the Switch because I have a Switch and see how it is. It has like 1, 2, 3, 4, 14 Pac-Man games on it. So all classics, right? From Pac-Man, Pac and Pal, um, just Pac-Man 256. So basically all the Pac-Man over the history of Pac-Man. All right, and I got it for $20, so not too bad. Usually, I mean, so many of the Switch games, even used, all right, secondary, are like 60 bucks. You buy it for 70 new, and people are selling them used for 60. Don't understand why anybody would do that. Buy them, right? If I'm going to buy something used and new at 70, I'm going to look for it and pay for it if it's, half price, like 35, $30, that kind of thing. I'm not going to pay $60 for a used game that was 70 new, but people are doing it, but I'm just not one of them, right? All right, so next up is a nice Blu-ray with a nice slipcover. All right, and it's all I see is you, and this is directed by what's his name? I picked it up because of the director, Mark Forster. He's the guy that did World War Z, and I collect him, so I found this for $5, so I picked it up. And Luc Besson is another director I collect, so I found Anna on Blu-ray, $5, so I picked that up. And I also collect Rob Reiner films, and this is Misery, which is the Stephen King book. I read that Stephen King book. I was so bored with it, I yawned, and I had difficulty getting through it. It's one of Stephen King's worst books, in my opinion. And then they make a movie out of it, and Kathy Bates, who plays James Caan, number one fan because he's a writer. Basically, this is about a writer who ends up in a snowstorm, getting stuck in a snowstorm, and Kathy Bates comes along and gets him out of a car accident that he was in, brings him home, realizes who he is, and decides to keep him like he's a pet or something. All right, and she pretends she's only she's only having him there because he broke his ankle and waiting for him to heal before she brings him out into the world or whatever. But basically, she's basically confined him and kidnapped him, right? And the reason why is because she really loves the books that he writes. Uh, a certain character in a series of books, and he's decided to kill off that character and stop writing those books, and she doesn't want him to. All right? So she's going to change his mind come hell or high water. It's a really creepy film, and Kathy Bates won the Oscar for her performance in it. But overall, the movie I find is okay. I don't think it's great, but others do. All right, so that's Misery, based on the Stephen King novel. And this is the gem that I found in this um, when I went looking around. Other than this Folio Society History of Europe 3-volume set, it's really beautiful. Is 50 years of the Planet of the Apes on Blu-ray. All right. So it has what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All 8 films. All right. Still has its J card on it. All right. This is this piece. All right. It has collector cards. Should I pull them out? Yeah. Anyways, they come with collector cards, which pop in here. What I mean, why I ended up buying this thing is because I have all the movies, um, but they're all in individual. A lot of them are individual volumes, right? So individual, and they take up a good amount of space. So this only takes up like that amount of space, and now I have all. Um, I think it's 8 movies, right? 9 movie collection, 9 movies. So I have includes the theatrical and unrated versions of Conquest of the Planet of the Apes and Battle for the Planet of the Apes. Now, if this doesn't have all 3 of the Planet of the Apes modern films, then yeah, that would have been. But I looked at it, and I think it does, right? Yeah, it has all 3 of them. So it has all 3 of the modern Planet of the Apes and all the older, like Planet of the Apes, the original with Charlton Heston, so all on Blu-ray. All right, and I figure this box is a lot smaller than all those other ones. They'll save space on my shelf, and I'll have them all in one package. Won't have them all scattered in individual films, right? So I thought that was kind of cool. So I'll put this in a plastic bag and put it on my shelf. All right, that's probably the gem of. Now it cost me $50 to buy, but I had sold a lot of books over the last week, so I could afford buying it. And actually, more of it was actually movies, Blu-rays, and DVDs that I sold than books. But I ended up buying that to save some shelf space and have all the Planet of the Apes films all in one, package, right? All right. So what's up next? I think we're almost done. I just have this one right here. I went to a pawn shop thrift store and I found a bunch of cool Blu-rays. All right. So let's go. All right. So we have the lady. Now did she just win an Oscar for that awesome film that stars as her husband, the Short Round from the Indiana Jones film. Now this one is directed. I picked it up because it's Luc Besson that directed it. All right, so I haven't seen. Now you know what? I have seen this, but I don't remember it. I remember watching this film when I was going through a bunch of Luc Besson films that I watched. I remember watching this film, but I don't remember exactly what it's about. But Michelle Yeoh, great actress. She did really good in that. Everything about everyone about everyone. I just watched that film and I can't remember the name of it, but it won. Did it win the Oscar? Just won the Oscar for best foreign language film, if I remember correctly. All right, so that's The Lady. After that is Beowulf. I picked this up because Zemeckis directed it. I have it on DVD, but I don't have it on Blu-ray, so I picked it up. All right, and then I picked up The Phantom of the Opera. This one is directed by Joel Schumacher. I do not have this one in my collection, so I picked this one up. I have not watched it. All right. So after that is Horns. Uh, I picked this one up because it's directed by Alexander Aja, who directs. I really like the film by him, Piranha 3D. It's quite a fun film. It's got I like horror, but I like horror that's more comedic than it is, like stomach turning. Um, and this one is quite fun and gross at the same time. And those are the type of horror films I enjoy the most, right? So I became a fan of Aja because of that, and I pick up all of his other films. So this one is Horns. I have not seen it yet. All right. And then Away We Go. This one is directed by Sam Mendes. I have watched this film, but I do not recall. It's been a while since I've watched it, but Mendes is a great director, and I collect him, so I picked this up. I think I have this on DVD, but I don't have it on Blu-ray. So that's Away We Go. And I got this one again. I got this on DVD, but I don't have it on Blu-ray. And this is a Sam Raimi film, basically starring Bruce Campbell. Is Bruce Campbell in this one? I don't know if Bruce Campbell is in this one, but it's Raimi. It's a horror. You pick it up. I have not seen it. All right. Then one of my all-time favorite romantic comedies, probably my second, maybe third. I don't know. It's up there in the top 5 of all my romantic comedies I like, along with like Forgetting Sarah Marshall and my all-time favorite, When Harry Met Sally, is Love Actually. I have this in a nice special edition DVD, but I did not have it on Blu-ray, so now I have it on Blu-ray. If you haven't watched this, sit down with your significant other and watch it. It's really great. Um, Hugh Grant does a really good job in this film, and it's not just love stories. It's also like heartbreak stories as well. Um, so it's kind of both of them together, right? And after that is Dead or Alive. Gotta love, gotta love me some beautiful looking women kicking butt. It's my one of my favorite types of films where you have action films with with women leads rather than man leads, and this one is quite fun to watch. All right, and then we got Capone, new. All right, and this one I picked up because Bennett Miller directed it, and Philip Seymour Hoffman is one hell of a fucking sorry, excuse my language, actor. It's too bad he's dead. All right, I would have enjoyed watching him in films until he got really old, uh, but uh, sadly, we will not be able to do that. Right, and this is basically about Capote, not Capone, the writer, uh, the man who wrote In Cold Blood, that true crime novel that he wrote, not like you know that In Cold Blood, and there's another one in the garden, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil are two true crime books that are written, but they're not written like a journalist would write them. They're written like a writer would write them, like in novel form, and that's how Capote wrote that book, and it made him famous. And this is a biography of him. Next up is In the Heart of the Sea, starring Chris Hemsworth. But the reason why I picked this up is because Ron Howard directed it, and I collect Ron Howard films. I have not seen this film. As you've noticed, most of these films I have not seen because they haven't been in my library, right? All right. So this one is a the last one is a Philip Thomas Anderson film, and it's called The Master. All right. And it also has Philip Seymour Hoffman in it, but it's directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, and I like his films, so I decided to pick this one up. And this one is new. So, all right. So that's everything. All right. All the films and all the books. Not too many CDs. I've been looking for CDs, but the CDs that I've been finding, I already have, and I'm contemplating whether I'm going to keep my CDs or not. I may start selling them off. I'm not sure yet. I don't really listen to them. I don't have a CD player. What I do is I transfer them into MP3 files, put them on flash drives, and listen to them in my car. So I probably should keep the CDs if I'm going to keep the MP3 versions of them, right? But they're taking up space in my basement because I took them. See, I originally I have like 12 of these IKEA shelves running up the hallway, up the stairwell into my living room or dining room, sorry, upstairs, and they were all full of CDs. But I I stopped. Well, I haven't really stopped collecting CDs. It's just that I've got into more collecting movies than CDs, so I've expanded my movie collection. I'm up to almost 6,000 films now, and I needed those shelves to put films on because they were piling up on the floor. And so I said, okay, well, I'm not really taking these CDs off my shelves, right? Because I just transfer them and I listen to the digital file, not the actual CD. Because I don't know. Remember in the 80s and 90s, well, more like the 90s and early 2000s, when CDs were at their height, people would have like their trunk full of CDs, and then they would pull them out to play them on their CD player in their car. But it was really bulky to carry around your music collection. You either filled up your passenger seat beside you full of CDs, or you put them in your trunk or back seat or something, right? So they're always getting in the way. But that's you had your collection with you. So what you really had to do was, decide maybe you'll have like 20 of them or whatever, or maybe you'll get rid of the jewel cases and just keep the thing and put it in a pouch pocket thing and have that or whatever. But um, once digital came about, where you can transfer all these CDs into digital files, whether you want full digital, like the FLAC file, or what really became popular was MP3. Put in MP3 at 320K, per second. I mean, it's 1/10 the size of it, and the music still sounds good enough. That's what I did, and so all of my library on a bunch of 32 gigabyte flash drives that I play in my car, right? So I don't use the CDs; they're more of archives, right? But now they're all in boxes and they're not on shelves, and I don't have access to them at all. Um, I'm either gonna have to put them in a closet somewhere because they're taking up space, and I'm trying to clean up my den so that it looks nice and presentable, and I can sit down and watch movies in my den. Like the whole reason why I did this in the first place, to listen to records or CDs or then have all these shelves around, right, or read a book or whatever, and it's just it's piled up with a bunch of stuff that I need to get rid of. So I'm thinking about maybe I'll keep my LPs and just sell my CDs. I'm not sure yet. But anyways, so this is what I got in the last since my last uh, haul video. Right, this one is a thrift store haul. I think the last one was as well a thrift store haul, right? Um, this is what I got, and basically, like I said, this is all free, right? Because I picked this book up for, let's say, $2. I'll sell it for 5 or 6. This one for like 6. So when you sell a bunch of books, let's say you sell 20 books and you're making, let's say, $3 or $4 or $5, depending on which book it is, um, off of it, you'll get like 80, $100, $200 sometimes a week. Um, well, that's a really good week for me, anyways. And then you have that money, you can go buy what you want. So you can pick up this for like $4 or whatever, or this for like $5, or this for like $20, that kind of thing, right? And so that's what I do. I go thrifting. I go pick up stuff that I'm going to put in my collection, and other stuff that I'm going to sell, because at the thrift store it's really cheap for it, and you can resell it for a price that it's actually worth. Like this one was, let's say, this one is $12 new. All right, so I can sell it for between $6 and $8 used. The person who wants this book, this specific book, can go into a Chapters or an Indigo store and buy it for that $12 or $15 or whatever it is, new if they want. Or somebody else bought this, and then they donated it to a thrift store for $2, and I picked it up. I'll read it, all right, but I've already read this book. So let's say I sell it for 6. The person that would usually go to a bookstore to buy it would pay twice that amount for that. So when they see it on an ad on Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace and they see it for 6, well, I'm going to save half the price. They buy it off me, and I'm the one that went and got it, right? So they're going to pay me, let's say, $4 to $6 for my time of going to get these uh, items to put up on Kijiji for them to buy used and save themselves some money, right? So they can do it too if they want, but most people don't have the time to go thrifting, or they have no interest in it. Uh, I quite enjoy it. I've been doing it most of my life, and basically most of the stuff that I've gotten in my life has been secondhand. And I can basically see the difference between, let's say, your average person and, let's say, a more well-off person. Isn't, it isn't, there's not a lot of difference. I mean, there may be more in the United States where, healthcare is an issue in the United States, right? Or neighborhood is an issue in the United States, where um, where you live might be more important, or you have a physical problem like diabetes, and it's going to cost you an arm and a leg to live, right? Uh, so, um, but in Canada, we pay high taxes, but we get benefits for those high taxes, and you don't have to worry about where you're living, because there are you know higher crime areas or lower, but it's all low crime, right? Um, So the difference between you being, let's say, an average, or whether you're more well off, is maybe you get a bigger TV, or maybe you're driving a BMW instead of a Hyundai, right? So um, maybe you have a bigger house, right? Uh, but basically you're living the same life, unless you're like ultra rich or something, and then you can live in a gated community and you live in a mansion or whatever, but have a helicopter or that kind of thing, or a boat, a big yacht. But basically, your average successful person earning hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, his life is not really much different than a person that's, let's say, earning 50 or $40,000 a year. just that they have better toys, I guess you could say, right? But if you thrift, I basically have stuff that I've seen other people show that they bought new and they're spending 30, 40, $50 for it. And I picked it up for $3, right? So you just have to be patient, right? So if you do have the money, buy it new. And if you don't, like me, then bide your time and you'll find most of the stuff that you want used. You just have to, do a little legwork, right? All right. And if you want to get it for free, then you have to do a bit of work, posting ads and taking pictures and things like that. But that's what you do. That's what you do. That's a hobby. So I'm going to do it anyways. Um, why not make a bit of money off it at the same time, right? That way I can get stuff without really, destroying my budget, right? Because people at my income level do need to have budgets. All right. All right. So thank you for watching. All right. Hope you enjoyed it. Um, Another video will be on your way. And like I said, look forward to the top 130 movies of all time, in my opinion. Um, I have finished them, but I said that I was going to do a top 50 directors that could have made the top 130 list, but they didn't because I haven't seen their movies. And I'm starting to think about maybe whether I should do that video or not, because like I said, I'm starting to think as a viewer of the video, I know the films are good and I know the directors are good because of reputation. I have not seen those films that I'll be recommending for you to watch. So should I be telling you to watch them if I haven't seen them myself? It's kind of ingenuine, isn't it? I'm kind of just like basing whether these films are great, not from my own opinion, but basically, consensus out there in the is it a zeitgeist out there in the zeitgeist out there in the environment, all right, of people watching. Well, I'll leave you with this, and maybe you can leave it in the comments on what you think about it. All right. Uh, take music. Music is very um, person centric, right? One person listens to, let's say, a CD or an album, and they think it's awesome. But then a second person who listens to that thinks it's awful, doesn't like it at all, right? So it's personal taste. Music is really personal taste, all right? So some people will think something is great, other people won't. So how do you know what's really good and what's not? How can you recommend to somebody something that they may just dislike because it's just crap, right? To them, but somebody else might think it's a gem and really enjoy it. Well, how you do that, because you can, all right? How you do that is it's from consensus. Do you understand? So it's just basically what statistics, right? So if you have one person who have has let's say listen to this album by Bob Dylan, all right, No Direction Home, the soundtrack. This is his bootleg series, right? And this is volume 7, I think. Yeah, volume 7. All right. Let's say somebody listens to this and a really big fan of Bob Dylan, and he listens to it and goes, "Wow, this is a really great album. I would highly recommend this album." And then somebody else listens to it and goes, "Ah, no, this stuff is crap," or whatever. Um, so what you do is you pay attention. If you don't know and you're looking for some advice or recommendations, what you do is you look at the sample number of it. All right. So I mean, if you have one person saying that this is a great film, you can take it or leave it and roll the dice and take your chances. But let's say 100,000 people have watched that film or listened to that CD, and 85,000 of them say it's a really good CD, and let's say 15,000 say it's average, or 10,000 say it's average, and 5,000 say it's not very good at all, right? Um, well, then you being a human being, just like everybody else is a human being, you probably percentage wise are going to be in that 85,000%, right? That 85% who think it's an amazing album, right? So that's how you do it. How do you find great music that you don't know? You can just go buy the stuff you hear on the radio or on a podcast or something that you listen to on Spotify and pick that up, or just listen to Spotify if you want, and they'll just feed you, the popular music of the day, right? But if you're looking for some, because I'm telling you, probably more than 90%, well, maybe 90% of all the quote unquote great music that has ever been made, you will never hear unless you go looking for it. All right. Um, During the radio days, you wouldn't hear it on the radio, and that's where everybody was listening to their music. They would listen to music, whether it was a pop rock, country, whatever station, they would listen to it, and there would be, artists on it, and then they would go find those artists, but and then buy the records. All right, but that is a limited, only like 10% of all the music, even less now because there's less artists that take up more public space, right? Um, you will not hear the great music on the radio or in Spotify unless you go looking for it, right? So how do you go looking for it if you don't know what to look for? Well, that's where good lists are. That's where recommendations come from. That's where, you go on and you go, what are the 100 greatest albums of all time? And you go looking for lists. And then you see that this list was made up of 5 million people voting on what they think the best albums of all time are. And then you see that, let's say Radiohead's OK Computer is like number one because like of the 5 million people, 4,800,000 of them think it's a great album, right? You're going, well, I may not think it's a great album, but if I'm gonna, roll the dice, I'm thinking that I'll probably really like OK Computer because like 90% of the population that ever heard it thinks it's an amazing album, right? So that kind of thing. Pink Floyd The Wall or Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon or the Zombies Odyssey and Oracle or the Stooges self-titled album. All these albums people have listened to and are going, wow, this is a really good album. And when you look at it, 10,000 people have listened to this album. 9,500 of them think it's a great album. You're probably going to like that album. All right. So um, you may not think it is as great, but you will rarely come across an album that you will hate if you do that, right? And then as you do that, and as you listen to more and more music, you go, yeah, that is a really good album, or yeah, I didn't really like that. I like this album by that artist better, or whatever. You're mixing it up, and you're not exactly the same as everybody else. You can have a different, view on stuff that other people may not. But overall, if you go and do that over the next few years of you listening to all this music that you haven't heard of because and the only way you will have heard of it is if you know read the history of music or like I said go find out what people recommend. um, you'll get to it. Uh, so that's what I mean that yeah, music is eclectic and movies are eclectic and art is basically eclectic, but how do you get to the great art? It's through recommendation from other people, and the bigger the sample size, the more likely you will find that stuff that you really enjoy that you would have never found unless you've done it that way, right? So think about that if you're delving into a new hobby or art form or whatever. uh, Look for lists, look for recommendations, look for large sample sizes of you know of people's recommendations, right? So anyway, so that's everything that I collected today, and basically, it's all basically free. Well, it's not really free. It takes my labor to get it for not having to spend any money on it. All right, but basically, like you know, transferring labor instead of money, right? So, all right, so. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a thumbs up if you did. Think about subscribing um, if you so choose. And it's fun to do this. And hopefully you will. Oh, yeah. So that's the reason why I did that musical popping back in my head is because I'm thinking that those 50 directors that I recommend, because there's more than 50, but there's a top echelon of like, I did 130 directors in my top 130 movie list, did 130 different directors, and I get to 180, and I think those 180 directors are a really good sample size of what the great directors and their films are. And I want to give you those 50 extra ones because they're not on my 130 list. But the reason why they're not on my 130 list is because I haven't seen those films, right? So should I recommend them without seeing them? That's the quagmire. And I said, well, these are the films, these 50 directors and the films that I'm showing you from these directors, highly, highly recommended by thousands of people that have watched these films. All right. So that sample size is really huge. And what I did was um, I took the directors that have, do the research, see what directors. Oh, I haven't watched that director, so I can't put him in my 130 list. But people are really, really, really impressed by that director. All right, and but I haven't seen any of their films. Can I recommend them to you? I'm starting to think that maybe because I haven't seen their films, that maybe I shouldn't recommend them to you, even though consensus says that that's a great director, and let's say that film is a great film. All right. I haven't seen it, so how can I recommend it? Is what it falls back down on. So I'm thinking maybe I'm not going to do that, even though in the videos I talk about it throughout those 5 videos. Of at the end of this 130, I'm going to give you 50 more directors and those films, like 200 and something films, by 50 more directors that you should watch. But I'm starting to think maybe I shouldn't do that because I haven't seen those films, right? So maybe I shouldn't recommend them. All right. But anyways, I'm still up in the air on it. However I decide, once I decide either which way or not, I'll put the top 130 films up as a video. I'm also thinking, because it's 5 videos and each one of those videos is like over an hour long. I do about 30 to 35 movies per video. Um, and so it's four times 30 is 120, right? Yeah, 130. Yeah, I think it's 4 videos and then an intro video that I've done, 5 videos altogether. Um, for it. And I'm wondering if I should just bulk it all together into one huge video, which is going to be like, 8 hours long, or should I break it up into segments like I did when I was taping them? I'm still undecided on that as well. But whichever way I decide, maybe I'll just do both, right? You'll end up getting them within the next few weeks. All right. And thank you for watching. Like I said, leave a thumbs up, subscribe if you so choose. I do not want to pressure you in doing it, but I would really appreciate it. And you have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye for now.